Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, How to Plan for the Unexpected, Planners versus Venues. My name is Michael Newton, and I use the pronouns he, him. I am the Senior Manager for Event Solutions here at CVent, and I will be one of your two hosts today. Couple of things to kick us off. Who doesn't love a bit of housekeeping? So today, we would like to keep this webinar as engaging as possible. Please, in the chat, do introduce yourself and let us know where you're dialing in from today. I'm joining you from our European headquarters based in Paddington in London today. If you do have any specific questions, also submit these in the Q&A tab on the right-hand side of the screen. One of our colleagues will be answering these in the back end. But if we do have any questions that get a lot of upvotes, we may be discussing that during the webinar today. So do make sure you get those questions in when they pop up for you. And we will also be saving time at the end for any questions as well. I do want to add a disclaimer. This webinar is not here to discuss whether we are for or against the various protests and strikes that have been recently happening, but it's to discuss ways and explore how we can navigate through these new normals that continue to impact our events program as we move on. We are going to be having a number of polls as well during the session today, so we do want to keep you engaged, so make sure you take part in those. And we are looking at the webinar lasting roughly 35 to 40 minutes, so we should be able to give you all a bit of time back in your day as well today. So I did mention I was one of two hosts today, so I would like to pass over to my colleague Nicola to introduce herself to you all.
Hi everyone, I'm Nicola Allen, the Marketing Director in Europe for the Supplier and Venue Solutions at CVent. Having spent most of my career working for an international events business, I can certainly relate to a number of the challenges that we're covering in the webinar, which leads me on to today's topic and what we're covering. So today we'll be looking at how to plan for the unexpected, planner versus venue. So today we'll be looking at items such as different stages of crisis management, how planners and venues can work together in times of crisis, how to evolve and adapt when there are times of crisis during an event, and lastly, how to leverage technology to mitigate risk.
Thanks, Nicola. So first, let's have a look at these three different stages of the crisis management. So we start off with adapt. What do you need to do to address the current situation? What data and systems do you need to be able to take immediate action? Just a few weeks ago, we were all aware that 400,000 workers were on strike in the UK. Now, 50,000 of those were striking in a peaceful protest around Hyde Park and Embankment. So if you had planned an in-person event around the area, what do you need to do to ensure that your event can continue on as planned? Then we go to evolve. What lessons did you learn in the crisis? And how do you move towards recovery? What are the areas that you adapted that may become part of your events program in the future? And then we look at accelerate. So once you understand those lessons that you've learned, how can you incorporate those learnings into your program so that you've got even greater success in the future? What does your program need to look like to drive those future leads? There are a number of critical things you need to be thinking of, but the most critical risk factors you need to be looking at are things like the regulatory risk. What are the regional, legal, or industrial regulations that are around your event? And how does their guidance actually impact your event? What's the financial risk? How is your organization's spend, revenue, and ROI being impacted as a result of this? Look at your contractual risks. What are the contract clauses that you have in place with your vendors or planners, such as your destination management company, maybe the AV or production, your tech providers, amongst a whole host of others? What does that small print look like for you? Then you've got your brand and your public image to think about. How will hosting the event, canceling the event, or any other action that you may have to take impact your company's brand and public image? Without there being this oversight, meetings and events may not actually align with your corporate messaging. Then we look at the financial side of things again. So we look at payments. This could be subject to human error, potentially intentional fraud. You need to make sure that all of your payments are actually accounted for. And then we look at safety and security. So from a natural disaster to a political uprising, conditions can arise that demand crisis preparedness by you and your team.
So now that we've established the 3 stages of crisis management, let's move on to part 1, preparing for a crisis, and most importantly, how planners and venues can work better together to prepare. We all know that the meetings and events industry is no stranger to a crisis. Natural disasters, political unrest, health scares, or an unmanageable act can happen at any time, anywhere in the world, and sadly, these are becoming more common than ever before. One recent challenge the industry is seeing in multiple countries right now are strikes. In the UK alone, between June and December of 2022, over 2.4 million working days were lost due to strike action, which leads me on to my first poll. We would love to hear from the audience. What is your first thought of a strike of any kind is announced to be at the same day as your in-person event? Would you A, cancel, B, change to virtual, C, change the date, or continue with the original date? Whether you're a planner or a venue, feel free to submit your answer in the poll tab on the right side of the screen. I'm actually really excited to see the results of this one, considering some of the strike activity that we've already seen happening in the UK and just in recent weeks. Of course, since the global pandemic, we have all dealt with one-off event disruptions, but hopefully all have a crisis management plan in place to address those situations. But when massive, widespread disruption strikes, the stakes are even higher. You immediately need to get your hands around your total event program to make critical decisions about the events that you host, the events that you attend, and your internal events, because let's face it, the show really must go on. As a venue, you need to be prepared to work with planners to support them depending on their decision and really clearly communicate urgent actions to your venue event team to ensure that there are no delays in times of urgency. Okay, so now let's go to the results of our poll and have a look. Great. Okay, so we've got some really interesting responses coming in here. So at the moment, we're looking at 7% would cancel, 23% would change to virtual, 37% change the date, and 33% can continue with the original date. I think really from my perspective, and especially the experiences that I've had, I think all the activities that you do or how you respond to crises like this all depends on when you receive that information. So obviously, if you find out there's going to be a strike the day before your event, you're going to react very differently to whether you know that, a month before or something like that. So I think it's good to see the results here and how they're impacting what people are thinking. I don't know if you've got any other thoughts, Michael?
I agree with you completely. We also have to look at, okay, what is the contingency plan that you have in place for that event? And looking at some of those other points that I raised before about, okay, if you go with A, with the 7%, what is the financial and brand implication that may have on your option? Then you look at B. Do you have that tech in place to be able to make that pivot easily? A lot of people probably don't, but then a whole host of other people do have that ability to be able to make that shift quite quickly. When we look at the contractual side of things for changing the date, do you have that ability with your venue? Do you have a backup date in place already kind of set up with them? So if you do need to push it out by a week, a month, 2 months, whatever, you've got that flexibility. And then we look at, those 33%, we've seen a number of events continue to go on. And, there's a bit of an impact in terms of, the actual number of kind of bums in seats on the day, but then maybe you are able to add in part of that virtual element. So maybe if it was an in-person event, maybe you have that ability to immediately shift it to a hybrid event for those people that are going to be, impacted by actually attending. But it is interesting to be kind of seeing, especially when we look at B, C, and D, not that much difference really in the kind of level of results in that. I think that's really indicative of the way that the world has changed, because years ago it would have just been, we have to cancel the event or we just go ahead. You didn't really have that option to go virtual or to change the date. You were either an A or you were a D. And so it's interesting now to see that people are seeing that they're able to kind of make that shift relatively easy. Cool. So we are going to be doing try that one again. We are going to be doing more polls during this presentation. So we do want to continue to see that level of engagement. But let's move on. So quick and easy access to all meetings and events information is really important for all parties. And this includes being able to identify event dates, the location, and understanding contract clauses and cost implications, as we mentioned before. So we all need to be able to access the information and quickly report back to our stakeholders with that potential implication when we do face these crises. As a planner, now is the time to actually take a step back and review your meetings and events program from beginning to end. You know what the drill looks like. A crisis happens when you least expect it, as we are all very much aware in recent weeks and months. So being prepared and being able to act fast by understanding your venue contracts and tracking those financial implications is more important than ever. Now, we fully understand the impact of unforeseen events, but we also have to come to terms with this is really the new norm. And let's be honest, it isn't really a surprise to any of us here today that we hear last minute that there's a tube strike or a train strike, or if the weather is going to have taken a turn. Recent years, we've seen some quite drastic shifts in weather. We got snow in March. We had the 40-degree heat wave last summer. So we also need to be able to look at, okay, how do we handle these side of things? So as you can see from the slide here, there's been a strike of some sort every day this month so far. And depending on your events, these could have a massive impact. And we have to remember that events are expensive and they are very time consuming. But whether you're the planner or if you're on the supplier side, they're also a great source of revenue. So when a crisis does hit, you do need to understand that monetary implication. You need to revisit your cancellation policies for your attendees, your exhibitors, your sponsors, and be able to clearly and quickly, I think speed here is of the essence, be able to communicate with your attendees to actually reduce any further disruption to them. And as a vendor, you need to ensure that your planners actually understand their contractual terms and conditions very clearly.
And as most of you may know, Cvent organises a number of customer events such as Cvent Connect, which is happening in London in November, and also in internal events and meetings of our own each year all the way across the world. Here's a couple of things of what we're doing to address the current situation and how we are planning for these unforeseen events so that they have minimal disruption to our total event programme. Firstly, we identify risks ahead of time. So in some crises, certain locations can be more impacted than others, and also at different times. In these cases, seeing data for attendee location and travel profiles is an absolute must-have, both for venues and the planners together. This insight not only helps you quickly notify attendees of important information, but it also helps you proactively identify the overall risk of attendee attrition and also potential cancellations for those events as well. So, for example, if attendees are traveling from overseas to your event, they may or may not be likely to cancel versus attendees who are based in the same city as where the event is taking place. We really recommend that you assess these risks and plan for different circumstances. Also, make sure you know the fine print. It's really a fact of life. Events come with contracts. From hotels to AV vendors to caterers, make sure you work together so that all stakeholders understand contract terms and avoid unexpected surprises on both sides of the fence. When a program-wide disruption occurs, get a quick, clear picture of financial risk because minimizing that risk becomes twice as important and twice as hard. Also, make sure you assemble basic information like cancellation deadlines, attrition dates, room block commitments, cancellation fees, and anything else that you think is really highly important. As a planner, once you've identified these impacts, the risks, the monetary impact, it's then time when you can decide whether you need to cancel the event, postpone for a later time, go virtual, or just push forward and continue. Of course, each of these options comes with its own pros and cons. Your events range in the value that they bring to your organization. So there's a big difference, for example, in cancelling a small internal meeting with, say, 20 individuals and cancelling a conference with thousands of attendees where actually your reputation and external brand may well also be impacted. So now let's move on. I'll pass over to Michael to look at our second poll.
Thanks, Nicola. So poll number 2. As a planner or venue supplier, do you always negotiate for an unforeseen event or cancellation clause in your contracts prior to sign-in? Yes, always, sometimes, never, or I will now. So if you go to the poll tab on the right-hand side, cast your votes, and we're actually going to come back to the results in a few seconds. So nowadays, crises happen quickly and without warning. And these steps will also often happen simultaneously. So you need to understand what is happening both externally and externally. Make sure that you're following governmental regulations, internal guidelines, and that you're monitoring the situation constantly. Get your team in place. Now, I'm not just talking about your planning team, but your internal sprint team that will help you make a decision on what action you need to take. Make sure that you're pulling a list from your event management platform of every upcoming meeting and event and break down each event in the system by event type, month, size, spend, and region. Make sure that you're creating a risk assessment document to rate events at the various conditions, such as attendee impact, business impact, internal impact as well, because this is going to help you with those other decisions that the stakeholders need to make. You then need to go through this event list with the relevant stakeholders and make that decision about each event. Like Nicola mentioned earlier, small events may be easier to shift to virtual. Large events may require more of a strategic approach that uses technology. Perhaps you have a different communication plan. Maybe there's an altered agenda, a modified budget. So making sure you've got these contingencies in place. And above all else, make sure that you stay agile. An ongoing crisis really does require creativity and flexibility by the whole team. Keep your team engaged and working towards providing that best event possible for your attendees. So we are going to now link in the chat our risk management for event planning ebook. So do check it out for more information and some practical tips that you may want to adopt into your own business. So let's take a quick look at the results from the second poll here. I will say I am not surprised that nearly 60% have said that they always do this. I think that was what we were expecting. Seeing that, people are sometimes having that conversation as well. I wasn't surprised there would be a smaller portion that were never. And it's interesting to see now, obviously, that 14% who are saying, they will start having that conversation. Nicola, I'm not sure if this is... You're probably not you're same as me, not surprised by these results at all.
No. I think what's really great though is looking at D and actually, the fact that we're having this discussion with event professionals and, in this webinar here is actually going to potentially, benefit people moving forward and how they're doing it. But no surprises, I think. It's good to see.
I can see some people going from never to A. So they're changing their minds because they feel like they're being called out a little bit. It's jumped out from 5%. So we're not calling anybody out. You're allowed to have your own opinions on this one.
It's all anonymous. Okay, great. Well, let's go back to the 3 stages of crisis management that Michael went through earlier and have a closer look at adapting to unforeseen situations. When faced with large-scale disruption, organizations can spend days or even longer assembling the information they need to determine the best course of action. As information and circumstance change, planners and venue suppliers really must remain agile and get as much intelligence as they can about the potential human and financial impacts of the crisis. In any crisis management situation, information gathering, I think we all know, is key. Meeting and event planners, along with venue suppliers and hoteliers, really must monitor the news constantly, understand news guidelines and regulations, and really work together to arrange a good course of action and next steps. To get a better idea of how to best move forward, really assess your risks, partnerships, and anticipated refunds and financial implications first before making any decisions. Having a clear discussion on what you can and can't be done to manage expectations really is key here. For example, if a planner is faced with the tough decision of cancelling their event due to a crisis, as a hotelier, what can you offer them to help reduce their financial loss, but obviously also doesn't negatively impact you as well? Okay, so now let's move on to part 2, which is all about Evolve, what to do when a crisis strikes. So now we've gone through the preparations of what we can do together to help prepare us for the unforeseen, but what can we actually do together when the actual crisis strikes on the day of our event? How can we push forward with business as usual and make sure we work better together to mitigate against those unforeseen events? As a planner, when a crisis strikes, it's absolutely critical to be able to look into your total events program and identify how or if your events will be impacted. If you don't have a central repository for your key event data, you may actually struggle a bit knowing where to start.
And it's important that you're looking at things like what events are upcoming? Where are they being hosted? Do you cancel, postpone, pivot to virtual? Also looking at who, what, where are the events can help you to actually make that call. and to utilize your event technology to actually take away a lot of that heavy lifting when you need to quickly and simply communicate with your event attendees and your venue suppliers. So once you understand the crisis and have that list of your events, you can actually conduct a risk assessment of each of them. You can run reports based on the event location, also your attendee location, travel itineraries for flight connections and things like this, to really understand that high-level view of how your attendees are going to be impacted. Now, for the planners, you also want to ask yourself some key questions. So what are the risks of hosting the event? Do you know what your cancellation clauses are with vendors, like we've mentioned a few times? Do you have event insurance? You should all have event insurance. What does your insurance actually cover? And what is covered by your force majeure clause, which we have all become very familiar with as a clause during the pandemic. I had many conversations about force majeure. So a few things you should be thinking about as well. So reviewing your refunds and your financial implications. It's probably a good idea to revisit your cancellation policies for your attendees, exhibitors, and sponsors, because you're going to need to understand what money you need to refund to each group and what that's going to do for your cash flow and revenue streams. Make sure that your systems are actually set up to handle issuing online or automated refunds, or be prepared to actually handle them offline if necessary. As I mentioned before, do you cancel, postpone, or go virtual? Now, each of these options really does come with its own pros and cons. Your event range in the value that they actually bring to your organization. So there is a big difference, like we mentioned, about canceling that small internal meeting for 20 individuals versus canceling that conference for 1,000 attendees. You really need to weigh up what is the best option. Postponing the event in a crisis, be careful how far in the future you postpone your event. In this constantly evolving, long-lasting crisis situation that we're frequently seeing now, you may have to reevaluate the decision about if you don't push your event far enough into the future, what does that actually mean? Taking the event virtual. Now, we all work in the events industry. We all love being in person, and virtual really isn't a replacement for an in-person event, but sometimes it is better than canceling. So when you're determining whether to take that event virtually, you need to identify the original goals of that event. Was the goal to share content, information, or updates? Then you could probably easily shift to virtual. Was the goal to gain leads and to network? If that's the case, a virtual event may not be the right option, as you might not actually be able to achieve those goals in the way that you want to. And then looking at actually canceling your event completely as the worst case scenario. But unfortunately, sometimes this does need to be done. If the benefits of the event don't outweigh the cost of making an alternative plan, it might actually be better for you just to cancel.
And venues and hoteliers, you may also want to ask yourself a couple of these key questions, such as how can we support event planners during a crisis and immediately activate venue staff to cater for planner needs? And by this, we mean signage, changes to event formats and timings. Also, what technology do you have in place at the venue to support these planners with these last minute changes? And that's really going to make the whole process really as efficient and streamlined as possible. And lastly, if the event still runs and maybe attendees, sometimes they've had a bit of a stressful journey getting to the venue, how can a venue staff offer a really warm and helpful welcome to those to make sure that their first experience of the event and of your venue is really as positive as possible?
And for all of these crises, and this goes for both the planners and the venues, it's so important to make sure that you have that communication plan in place. So while the trains and bus strikes have massively disrupted events and prevented attendees and venue staff from getting to the event, we've seen record temperatures cause venues' air conditioning to fail or heating systems to really just not be enough. How do you respond to these in-the-moment challenges could determine the future loyalty of your event visitors, and how you show support as a hotelier will actually determine if the planner is going to book with you again. If your event is underway when a crisis breaks out, having a clear, pre-approved communication plan in place will help you quickly provide instructions and actually give attendees a full range of choices of what they can do. Or if there's a major incident that occurs in the vicinity of the event, such as striking workers protesting in the areas, your attendees may appreciate you extending the event's hours so that people can choose to stay and wait for the situation to change. Now, whatever action you actually take to resolve the impact of the crisis, communicate to them via an event app, allows for you to send push notifications to a large number of attendees instantly. This way, Everyone is aware of the situation and what is being done by both the venue and the event planners to resolve any distress or concerns by the attendees.
And don't forget to send specific communications for sponsors and exhibitors, as a crisis will impact them differently than attendees. They, for example, have much more complex logistical challenges that they will face as well. Ensure that your communications plan extends to all digital signage as well within the venue, as well as social media channels, your event website, and your email, and even your phone list. And also double check that all your channels are communicating the same information in a consistent manner. I think that's really important, along with any contact information to use if there are questions. Finally, make sure that a team member is then constantly monitoring your digital channels so they can respond really quickly to any questions that your stakeholders may have. And I think the same goes as well, of course, for venues and hotels. So what is your internal communication strategy to keep all relevant departments in your venue updated in the running of the event for your clients? Because they might have last minute changes and requirements. Have you also looked and pre-planned for any changes for staff who may be on a rota? I think our message here is absolutely that preparation is key here.
So let's jump into part 3, as we mentioned, which is accelerating and utilizing your event technology. So I think we can all establish that having the right event technology in place can also help you to tackle the impact of the unexpected macro challenges on your events. And with the right amount of planning, dealing with the unforeseen circumstances and preparing for the future can be less of a stressor and put you in a position to succeed and reach your goals, even under the most challenging of circumstances. And I'm just going to pop back over to Nicola for the next poll.
Great, thank you. Yes, so third and final poll for this webinar. So this one's for the planners listening. So how do you currently source venues? Do you use Google searches, contacting venues and hotels that maybe you've previously worked with? Are you utilizing the Cvent supplier network, or maybe some other sort of sourcing technology? So don't forget to go to the poll tab on the left of the screen to vote, and we'll come back with the review and look at the results in just a second.
So while we do actually wait for everyone to vote on the poll, and I want everyone to vote on the poll, let's touch on the importance of event tech for planners. If you had to cancel a venue, which can't then be reused, automated RFP sourcing tools can save you hours in trying to find an alternative venue that is able to meet all of your requirements. Event technology can also provide detailed data on which attendees may be affected and where they're located, which can then inform what actions you take to ensure the safety of your attendees. With venue sourcing, you can maximize the use of sourcing tools and technology to swiftly adapt in the times of crisis. You can accelerate your programs and ensure that you're using venue sourcing best practices while actually addressing these new challenges. You can reduce the number of manual hours that you're spending to secure that new venue. You're able to get in contact directly with those hotel contacts versus trying to find who you should be reaching out to manually. You're able to compare those bids side by side to make sure that you're getting the most comprehensive rate. Versus sending multiple emails or making multiple phone calls, you're able to send just one RFP to multiple venues to get the pricing and availability and ask any key questions that may be unique to yourself. And Cvent provides support to venue suppliers to answer these RFPs as well with you. So this is really something that you should all be looking into. And if it's not a tool that you're utilizing at the moment, make sure that you're reaching out to your Cvent account manager, and we can arrange for you to have a demo on this product, which is actually a free to use tool within the system as well. So let's have a look at the results from the third poll. So what do we have here? So Okay. So kind of similar result-wise. So Google searches. So I'm really not happy with the results here. Only 8% of you using the Cvent supplier network. We need to change that up. Oh, there we go. People are now changing their answers again now. They've called them out. I'm a little surprised at this. I thought we'd have more people using the supplier network. So Nicola, me and you probably need to sit down and chat about how we increase that percentage. It's interesting that we see most people in kind of A and B because they're really the most manual options that are up there. Nicola, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think people like to source venues in different kinds of ways. I think it depends on the complexity of your event as well. But I think it's good to have different options when you are looking at different venues. But I think the utilization of technology now to try and streamline the process, where you can almost do sort of instant booking, and the venues can communicate directly with the event planners and make sure their requirements are sent over like specifically. I think that all that technology that is evolving at the moment really helps to streamline the process. So I would expect sort of technology to be utilized a lot more rather than the traditional way moving forward.
Completely agree with you. And when we look at, again, streamlining all of these processes, when we look at and I'm gonna hark on about this event supplier network here for a second. If you're using this event management tool, this data flows in automatically. So it really is giving you that end-to-end solution and taking away a lot of that manual work that a lot of you are currently doing by the looks of things. So we definitely want to make sure that we're changing that. But me and Nicola could sit here for hours and talk to you about the benefits of the event supplier network, which we aren't going to do because we've got about 25 minutes left in this blocked out time. But we will make sure to kind of reach out to people about the supplier network as well, so that we can give you some more information. So while perfect may seem, seem relative in our new normal, using tech, as we mentioned there, for sourcing venues will get you closer to that goal and move you away from that kind of manual approach that you have. The narrowing down process, however necessary, can quickly become quite overwhelming without the aid of tech, as we mentioned, especially if you need to change your venue at last minute. At the end of the day, you need to find a destination that meets your group's needs and is actually going to promote maximum attendee satisfaction. These venue sourcing tools actually provide a truly effective online marketplace for you, and it's giving you massive sourcing power with a powerful database just at the end of your fingertips. The exhaustive and sometimes exhausting process of manually searching from dozens of windows open in your browsers just disappears for you.
And I think for venues and hotels, technology adoption that you were just talking about is really just as important. So responding to RFPs accurately and in a timely manner, really making sure you're leveraging the right technology and the right platform, not only helps a venue and hotel secure more business, but also kicks off the event planning process, which we all know how complex and time consuming it is, with a planner in the best possible way. As a venue and hotel, you can also leverage a number of different tools that are available out in the market, such as event diagramming, interactive floor plans, which clearly showcase the event space available to a planner. And sort of, when we're talking about crisis as well, you can look at emergency exits, venue layouts, and really by working together, you can plan for different event formats in advance, prepare for any last minute changes, and also most importantly, you can do this together as well.
And if you take anything away from today, the three key words I want you all to remember are preparation, flexibility, and agility. For situations you never expect, you just have to be able to adapt at the drop of a hat and make decisions about your meetings and events that have a real business impact. Once the crisis clears, it's then time to evolve your meetings and events program and move forward by putting in place those new processes and those systems in place that are going to help you respond better next time. Now, by using event technology to analyze your registration data, hotel room bookings, the travel itineraries, this is going to give you that clear picture of who is impacted and what you can actually do to help those individual people, because it is going to be quite unique to each attendee. Now, we all know far too well that failing to prepare is preparing to fail. And at the same time, we also know what is said about the best laid plans. So let's learn from every unexpected instance, review, test, and then go again. So finally, you need to accelerate your meetings and events program by looking at how you host meetings and events and making smarter, data-driven choices that rely on automation and insight so that you're actually going to be able to navigate through these unforeseen times as well. So I think we are now going to jump into some Q&A. So let me have a quick look at some of these questions that we've got here. So we have, okay, so let's go with this one. How do you even start the conversation with negotiating? Oh, there we go, we're reading the wrong thing. So let's go again. For this reason, we're trying to encourage flexibility internally with stakeholders, but it's not always that easy to start the conversation. Tips. I'm very much one of these people that if you need to get something done, you just have to keep hammering it home. You just need to make sure that people are listening. If sometimes it means that you're being considered as disruptive, I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing. I think if you're going about it the right way, and if you've got the data that you know is cohesive, it makes sense for them to look at the decisions that you're making. I think that's the route you really need to go down. I think right now, all business decisions really need to have that backing of data for people to actually start listening to what's happening.
Yeah, I think from my perspective, I guess it depends what stakeholders we're referring to here. But yeah, internal stakeholders, an event organization, I think it's just planning for that flexibility, starting those conversations early and managing expectations. If you're talking about stakeholders in terms of suppliers, I always think, when I'm working with, external suppliers, it's again sort of building up that relationship from the foundations and, explaining your situation, keeping them informed the whole way through. So again, it's not really a surprise if your circumstances do change, and being just really open and transparent in those conversations as well.
Other ideas / tips of searching for a venue? I feel like me and Nicola will have the same answer for you. Make sure you're using the Cvent Supplier Network. There are hundreds and thousands. I think it's Nicola, keep me honest here. I think it's about 300,000 venues.
It's around 200,000, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, okay, I'm jumping up a little bit, so thanks for keeping me honest on that one. And, like I mentioned, this is a great opportunity for you able to reach a ton of venues in one go. Gone are the days of, having the yellow pages and kind of flipping through and trying to find or doing those Google searches. You're now able to, in one place, have all of the data about all of the venues that you're reaching out to. But I will let Nicola actually jump into this because this is really her area of expertise and not so much mine. So, Nicola, you could do the selling pitch on this one.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think, you said most of it, Michael. I think it's for me, it's a great tool to use because it's specifically designed for event planners. So therefore, it contains all the information that you'll need. There's certain filters that you can leverage there that allows you to pick what size venue you want, what kind of venue you want. And then you can sort of filter by geographic regions. And it also shows you and displays sort of other venues that are similar to the one that you've requested. You can look and see what other venues are in the vicinity. You can check different availability on dates. It allows you to communicate directly with the venues. They will send back proposals that are customized to what your requirements are. So the list goes on, really, to be honest, and the benefits of using that. So again, I can't stress enough, anybody that hasn't utilized this tool should definitely start leveraging that in any of your venue searches, because it's a lot easier than going through Google and finding venue by venue. You can literally get lists straight away.
Yeah, and I will say, for anybody that's on here that is already using the event management technology side of things, reach out to your account manager. We can get you kind of signed up with an account. It's easy enough. And even if you're not using this event management tool, make sure that you're going online and checking out the Supplier Network. You can sign up for an account and, we'll get you going. It'll give you a taster of the Cvent experience. Okay, I think we have time for one more question here. So, we never want to cancel an event. Sometimes it's just easier, as doing the work to change it to a different time or venue is time consuming. I'm not sure if that's a statement or a question.
Looks more like a statement, but
Yeah.
I guess it's an interesting one. I mean, I'm sure nobody ever does want to cancel it, but I do appreciate that is a lot of work in terms of changing it. I literally had to change an event that was happening this week last minute as well. So, and obviously, you have your reputation at stake there. There's a number of stakeholders that you have to consider then. But I think, when you're making the decision whether to cancel or not, that's, everything that we've gone through today, I think is a great list of things that you need to consider that will hopefully help you make your decision easier as to whether, what the right decision is for your event and your circumstances.
Yeah, and with items like this, it's about how do you take the stress off. So we mentioned about that communication plan. What technology do you have in place? So that venue sourcing side of things, if you're utilizing a tool like the Cvent Supply Network, or there are other tools in the market that you probably shouldn't be using because we have a preference. But if you're using those, it makes the venue sourcing side of things that little bit easier. So you can potentially have those backup venues if needed. But then looking at how do you communicate with your attendees? So if you're utilizing let's say a mobile app, that's going to be a quick and easy solution to be able to communicate with all of your attendees throughout these changes and these updates, and being able to get information immediately into the palms of their hands. Whether it is a time change, whether you're shifting the dates of the events, whether you're canceling altogether, whether you're going virtual, you're going to be able to get all of that information easily and quickly out to all of your attendees. So there's a few different things to really be looking at on that one. So I know that there are a couple of other questions in the chat, but we will answer those offline. So I think we are done with the Q&A part for today.
Great.
So
Okay. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so I think that should be the end of our webinar. So thank you so much to everybody for attending. If you have missed any parts and you'd like to rewatch, of course, this webinar will be available on demand as well, and we'll send out the links.
And we do also have a number of webinars coming up as well, as you can see here on the screen. So April 20th, we've got your ABM strategy and event data, a match made in heaven. April 24th, navigating the new landscape of corporate travel business with GBTA and CVent. I'm not going to read all of these because you can all see them for yourself. But again, I do want to thank you all for attending the webinar today. And with that going on, we hope that you have found, the insights helpful so that we can help you better prepare for any unforeseen crises that may arise. And, on behalf of Nicola and myself, thank you all. And we hope to see you at the next webinar. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.